Well, actually, so for book two, I wanted to kind of challenge myself and expand on themes because when I
Okay.
wrote book one, Relentless Blades, as a debut author, I had written short stories, but never a full-length novel like this. So I really tried to keep Relentless Blades fairly focused, fairly linear. Not to say that it doesn't have nuance and excitement, but I try to keep the story. Like if you think of Raiders of the Lost Ark, right? It's Indiana Jones, and you're following him where he goes. It's not branching off into a bunch of different stuff. So that was kind of like, okay, let me keep the focus centrally on these. So it's only really has the two main character points of view. They're on their quest. You're kind of following them the whole way through. Because I wanted to not bite off more than I could chew for a first book,
I
and I
get.
thought, let me keep the scope fairly contained. But so for the second book, I knew, okay, Ashbound Oaths, I need to expand it out. And I wanted to really get in the heads of some of the other characters. So there's some of the characters that are more secondary characters in Relentless Blades, like Everly, who's a priestess of paragons of retribution. They're one of the factions
Cool.
in the book. I've got Frelick and Alindra. She's a mystic. He's a tiddler, which is kind of a halfling or a hobbit type race. And so they were secondary characters, important but secondary. So when we get into Ashbound Oaths, I really especially wanted to try writing from a female character's point of view. Everly has a lot of expanded points of view. And then I wanted also to get in the mind of this guy right here,
Okay.
Orgast. He is basically my Darth Vader of the
Oh,
series, if you will. So I wanted to dive into his mind, and without trying to give too many spoilers for Relentless Blades, Ashbound Oaths for him explores what happens. We always watch the movies and the heroes win or they achieve their objective, and maybe the villain is defeated or whatever. But what happens to the villain after that? So I thought about like Star Wars, like what happened when Darth Vader spun off in his TIE fighter between Star Wars and Empire
Hmm.
Strikes Back. I don't think the Emperor patted him on the back and said, "Oh, you let the Death Star get blown up, Darth, no big deal." Sure, there were probably some repercussions, and I'm sure I haven't read all the expanded lore. I'm sure somebody knows that there's books probably been written about it, but this was my chance to get inside the head of what does a villain do when things didn't go according to his plan.
Hmm.
And so that was kind of my challenge for this book, is to really kind of expand it out and look at different characters' points of views.
That's cool. I totally get that. I have a like a just like a heist book, um, with two characters. They put a crew together, and I just focus on like one city for it. But then like book two, I was just gonna have it just be one thing, but then book two, I was like, well, there's like a lot of cool stuff here, and then I was like, well, book
Yeah.
two, is like kind of set up to now be a trilogy. My friends are like, you just can't write a short story. It's like your problem. And like, but they're like, but this sounds amazing. So now, yeah. But I totally get that. It's like, and I think it's good because sometimes I'll read somebody's first book and they definitely bit off more they could chew, right? They're trying to put too
Yeah.
many POVs in, and nothing's really, you have all these little threads that are cool and maybe cool characters, but not really, pulled together cohesively. Yeah, so I think that's really smart on your part. A lot more people are saying that now when they're coming on here than in years past, I have to say, at least in my experience. And I think that's smart because I think if you do some things really well, right? Like do a few things really well, people will read book two. But if you try to do a bunch of things not well, they're not going to read book two. I mean, it's just got to be the reality, I think, for any book, let alone, indie authors at this point. So I don't know. I personally, I think that you made a really good decision there.